jeopardizing, you know, this is jeopardizing a huge amount of money for their deposit and, banking structure. Has anybody talked to them and explained to them, where we are on this? I mean, I'm just being fair. We've had a working relationship with M&T for a long time, and I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, this is Jason. If I could just jump in quick. I kind of glossed over there when I was talking, but one of the issues I had recently, I looped Dave Worthing, their regional VP, and Brenda Clapper, who's our customer relations manager, into a service issue that I was having. Brenda got back to me right away, so I will give credit there. She did get back to me right away and helped push it along, but I hadn't quite heard from Dave, and I was hoping to hear from him on it because I indicated in that communication that this was after a number of other issues, so I have not heard from them to reach out on anything on that, but I did indicate in that email that I was unhappy with the current state of affairs between us and their, from my perspective, their customer relations with us.
So Dave never got back in touch with you to discuss your concerns?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And to continue with that, we haven't actually gone to M&T with an ultimatum saying we need some satisfaction or we're going to pull the account. That hasn't happened yet. So I brought this up to Mark to put on the agenda just so that we could have a conversation about it and discuss options before we pull that trigger, so to speak.
Thank you.
Colleen, you've sort of brought up a larger issue, which I think is mostly under your purview, and that is the possibility of taking some of our current services that are provided by the Treasurer's Department and moving them online. I see advantages and disadvantages. I know at least some of the prior treasurers really wanted that physical face-to-face interaction with the public, but of course now we're in the middle of a pandemic, so maybe that's not the most positive thing. If we were to move services online, for example, there's credit card fees, and if we're charging $5 or $10 for something, my assumption is that the Treasurer's Department receives a very small percentage of that, and much of it is forwarded on to either a municipality or the state of Pennsylvania. And my assumption would be that the credit card fee would eat up more than what you're receiving for processing the paperwork.
Right. Other offices have put that fee onto the customer so that if they elect to do an online transaction, there's essentially a convenience fee that would cover that. And
so the convenience
fee
is legal then?
Well, what the law states is that you can't charge more than the face value of whatever the license is. And if you tack on an additional convenience fee that's at the discretion of the consumer, that's a gray area. I know that Rich strongly felt that it conflicted with the letter of the law in charging more than the face value. But even the Treasurers Association solicitor explained that it's not cut and dry. So it's a matter of interpretation. Some treasurers have interpreted that they can't do convenience fees because it doesn't abide with the letter of the law, and other treasurers do it, and they explain that it's a convenience fee that's separate from the license fee, and that no one is obligated to pay it because they could come into the office or do other things and avoid that convenience fee. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat. I think it's the usual answer we get when we try to do something innovative in county government. It depends.
Yeah, The short answer is we can do it. The longer answer is that some people disagree.
Now,
Other treasurer offices are doing it.
all right. Now, is that something your office is actually interested in doing? Is it more paperwork on the back end to be charging the credit cards?
I'm not entirely sure about that. I'm not prepared to answer that. So that's a good question. Thank you. In some instances, like with dog licenses, it would make our lives a lot easier because the customers would be entering that information and it would go directly into a database as opposed to right now, everything is on paper. We write out the license and then it all gets transferred to an Excel spreadsheet. We could, if it's online, then our dog license agents can also access it and enter their information directly. And then we can send that file up to the state dog law office. When I spoke with our representative, not representative, but one of the main administrators at dog law, she loves when offices go online with the dog licenses. It makes her life a lot easier. So that's just one example.
And
Colleen, how does the consumer get the license, the physical license then?
It would get mailed to them, which is what we're doing right now with the office is closed. Or, I apologize, Steve. If they do the license online, like a dog license, they should be able to print it. I would have to look into that. I apologize for not having that answer for you.
Well, I'm just thinking there's a metal dog tag that has to be in that equation as well.
Yeah. Yep, that would have to get mailed out to them, which is what we do anyway.
And Colleen, is there canned software that would handle the customer-facing portion of this, the processing the credit card, the entering of the dog license and other data into a format that could be transferred to the state of PA?
Do you mean from FNB or just generally out there in the world?
I'm assuming generally out there in the world. I don't think FNB is going to support a dog license database.
But well, what they do is they provide the interface, and then the information comes to you. There's a dog law, I think it's called like licensemydog.com or something like that, that a lot of treasurers use. So there are options available already. For convenience sake, I thought it would be easiest to have all of our online services under one umbrella rather than having dog licenses handled by this software and other things handled by that software. And so, like I said, in Dauphin County, it's all unified. It's all done under the same FNB interface. And it doesn't look like an FNB interface. They just designed the website and integrated it into their county website.
All right, so you might not have this level of detail yet, but did perhaps FNB write that interface, or maybe somebody within the IT department at Dauphin County write the interface?
No, it was done specifically by FNB. FNB approached me about it on saying, hey, Dauphin County's doing this. And separately, the treasurer there has posted email to our treasurers group that talked about her transition too, and she's been very happy with it. So. A larger issue, and maybe Tom Martin could speak to this, a big concern about moving the M&T account is that we get a lot of ACH payments for various departments. And I don't know how disruptive it would be to switch over to a different bank and how that will affect all of our various ACH receipts that come in. So I don't know if Tom's still on the line, if he could speak to that, or if he... Are you there, Tom?
I think Tom's muted.
This is Jason. I'll jump on. Sorry, I had to mute my video for a moment because it's obstructed. But that's something we're looking at in our office too, just to find out the number of ACHs that come in, the payments that are automatically issued out of the general account and stuff too. So it is it's a little bit of a long list, but like anything, it's surmountable. But it just is the time that it would take to do it and make sure we capture all of those before we would move the account. So we would probably have to do a couple of month look back to see the quarterly ones, the monthly ones, whatever it is, just to make sure everything would be captured there. And then we would have to look at Finance Plus just to see. The one thing I couldn't remember offhand is if our checks automatically have the routing number and account number on them, or if that prints from the system. So if it prints from the system, that's very easy and nice. If it doesn't, if it's already printed on the check from M&T, then obviously we would have to get new checks, all that sort of thing. So there's a couple of fairly significant pieces here to do that. So the conversation today is helpful about it, but if we want to go that route, we just have to come up with a plan for it and figure those things out and then move forward.
Yeah, so the main reason I'm bringing this to the committee rather than just Jason and I deciding to do it is because I just want some feedback about other people's thoughts about whether it's more work than it's worth for the benefits that we'd be gaining. So any thoughts you all have, I'd appreciate, especially, like I said, Tom, if you have any thoughts on it.
Yeah, Colleen, you are correct. There would be an impact with all the ACHs, because right now all of the pass-through monies, all the grant funds are set up to go through that M&T account, and that's set up as an authorized account in there. And I just know that as we went through this process right now, even for the CARES grant money that just came through, some of the other funding that came through, because we had talked about it just going directly right into the money market account that we have, but that wasn't set up as an authorized account. So we would have to go through and get that all set up, because there are a lot of funds right now, a lot of pass-through funds and a lot of ACH funds that come through that are set up with that account. So we would have to get all of that set up and make sure that would be in place.
Colleen,
So,
this is Margaret.
yes, go ahead.
Just a question. Do you have some timing for this in mind? I know right now, between the budget and all the receipts we're getting in for the County Relief Block Grant and our upgrade in Finance Plus Pro, it's a might be the perfect storm with everything changing at once. So I didn't know if you were thinking January or if that's too late, or I know January is very busy with closing for the controller's office. So I just know that we have a couple months here that are busier than most of the rest of the year.
No, I didn't have any plans. So if we wanted to wait until a more convenient time, I'm flexible.
Will really be Tom and Jason's call, but I just know that we're asking those two offices to do far more than is typical, given the projects we have going on right now. Not that it couldn't be done. We're talking January, that might be better than November, something like that.
Yeah, and that would be fine. I'm not in a hurry to do this. And especially because I want to make sure that it's done right, and if we do it, and that all our bases are covered. Tom, do you have a sort of general sense of whether you think it's more beneficial to consolidate over at FNB or maybe another institution, or if we should just leave well enough alone?
Again, I think it depends on, where you're at and what, if you're not feeling that you're getting the services or you feel you could get more services, you can weigh those things out. Like you said, there'll be some lifting to switch it over. And obviously, if we were to do that, we'd have to keep, you'd have to keep that M&T account open for a while too, till all the transactions ran through. So we would have, a lot of that. And there's a lot of stuff running through there right now. But I guess it would just depend on if the benefits in the long run would be more worth it, But in the short term, like Margaret said, it's going to be a lift. And so I think we have to strategically look at the timing of it, to be able to make sure that we have all the resources in place to be able to make it as efficient and as effective as possible, because there would be a lot of moving parts. And like she said, right now there's a lot of stuff going on right now. But I think it would just depend on again, you work with the banks day in and day out, and you have those daily interactions, and same thing with Jason to an extent, things that he's doing. So it would just be on, whether you'd see a more beneficial thing in the long run.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is questions to ask. Mark was asking about what happens with the database. Is the database actually maintained within the county, or is it maintained by FNB? And for Steve, we might want to approach M&T and let them know about our concerns and give them an opportunity to address them before we make a big move.
I think we could do that research. I think there's some value to it, but also I think the timing right now, particularly with the budget and all the CARES Act engagement, I think maybe next year would be a good time to jump into this.
Okay, but certainly we could have a conversation with M&T before the end of the year.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts, Mike?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I essentially agree with what's being said. I just wanted to add my voice to it. I think Commissioner Dersham raises a good point about reaching out to them, just laying the track so that they're aware of the concerns we have. But at the end of the day, I do think that from a operations standpoint, it really is Colleen and Jason who are dealing with them day in, day out. And so I'm comfortable whatever they think is the best and right move. And then in addition to that, the timing is extraordinarily key for that. In 2021 might be a very opportune time to do it. So I just wanted to add all that, but I think it's been a good conversation so far.
Great. Yeah, I do see if it's just the issue of the check scanning equipment, we're a major customer, to Steve's point. I should really think that we could work something out with M&T. But as you're mentioning, Colleen, there are a variety of other services that you'd like to potentially put online in the near future. And what I'm hearing is that that's just not a possibility with M&T. Whereas other counties have successfully used the other bank to put those services online. Yeah, it sounds like obviously right now, Controller's office, Finance office, under a lot of stress at the moment with all the new moving parts on top of the busy budget season. But yeah, I mean, if you and Jason and Finance want to move forward with this aggressively, January, February timeframe. But yeah, let's to Steve's point, let's give M&T a chance. Let's see if we can get them to improve their service. But yeah, I mean, if the service doesn't improve, if they're not going to give us the check scanning equipment at no cost, and if your office does want to move forward with credit cards and taking applications online because it's going to be less work and more accurate for your department, if M&T doesn't offer that, they don't offer that.
Thanks all for your input. I appreciate it. I'm not so proud that I think that I could just do this unilaterally without some input. So I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Colleen, do you know if F&B views the other accounts? When I say other accounts, I'm thinking the probation account, up with the MDJ. They fall under M&T's umbrella account, so they don't get charged fees for like bounce checks. Do you know if F&B would give us the same benefit? Because we might have to move, or they might want to move multiple accounts from F&T to F&B. I don't know if F&B does that.
I don't know the answer to that. It hasn't come up. I'm trying to think. Wendy might be a better person to ask about that just because she sees the statements every month. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
This is Jason too. I thought I had an answer actually at the moment, but it went out of my head. But I would, my guess is, I know we haven't asked that question directly to FMB yet in the conversations, just in the meetings that Colleen and I had with FMB on other topics. This just hadn't come up, but my guess would be, and their willingness what they're already doing with equipment and stuff, of what they would be willing to do there, that they would also be willing to waive those fees if everything had moved. But that's just my perspective, my thought on it.
Well, we do have three plus months to nail those details down. While first giving M&T a chance to improve the service and see the fees on the tech scanning device, kind of from our perspective. But yeah, it sounds great. Anything else on this particular topic? All right. Let's see. Was that something else, Colleen?
No, just so our next steps are basically just to communicate with MNT, get some more details from FNB.
Right, with the potential that, if you still want to move forward with this, once budget season and pandemic clears up a little bit in early
Right.
2021, yeah, this is mostly your lift. So,
All right.
All right, our next topic is the general fund balance policy. We began talking about this a little bit at the last meeting during the Baker-Tilly report. They did mention that for fund balances, the GFOA best practice is to maintain a minimum, I don't know why they said approximately, but a minimum of 2 months of general operating expenses, which somebody stated was roughly $4 million a month. So from that viewpoint, if we looked at the unassigned general fund balance as of December 31st, we were a little over the minimum. I did attach some additional documents. I think it was late in the day, regarding the best fund practice policies for counties in the state of Wisconsin, which instead of recommending roughly 2/12 of the fund balance be maintained, they had a matrix where they recommended that if you did have strong finances, which is I think where I would put us, maybe not very strong, but there's 6 levels, and I would probably put us at the second highest level. They recommended, depending on a variety of factors, anywhere from 10% to 30% of the fund balance as a reserve. I think another thing we need to discuss is, when do we measure the unassigned fund balance? Do we measure it on December 31st, which does end up being a relatively average month for county cash flows? Or would we measure it in our worst case scenario, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, would tend to be something like the end of March? So I want to open that up for general discussion, because we probably want to take at least 1, if not 2 more meetings to set a policy that would have maybe a minimum, an ideal, and then a maximum amount of unassigned general fund balance.
Yeah, you are correct. Typically, we typically look at the unassigned general fund balance at the end of the year in December. And to your point, it does dip down a little bit more in January and February and into March, and then we start to have the real estate tax revenue come in, and then that unassigned general fund balance will start to head on up. But to your point, like you said, typically GFOA recommends at least 2 months as a minimum. But again, they will stress, and I think even when we have outside auditors come in, they will stress it needs to be unique to each county. So just because there's that minimum level there doesn't mean that's what it needs to be. The other thing to take into consideration is other funds, for instance, like CYS, which aren't part of the general fund. We end up floating them a lot of times in cash because of the fact that they're waiting on a lot of state funds. So that's also a piece into this. But right now, if you're just looking at general fund, revenues or expenditures, we're looking at about $40 million a year. So again, we're looking at about 2 months worth. That's about $3.5 million a month, or about $7 million in the unassigned general fund balance for 2 months worth of activities. But again, when you start adding in these other funds, which again at times we have to float because of the fact that they're waiting on funds to come in, that's something to consider, to think about too.
Good point, Tom. And that's covered in the second document I sent, which is the GOFA fund balance guidelines. They recently moved it from another spot, so it took a little bit of digging to get it. But I believe they recommend anywhere from 45 to 90 days of cash flow for funds of those types. And I don't think we've really gone into that in the past to talk about funds, reserve funds for departments like CYS, where it's not uncommon for us to have to advance a full 3 months worth of expenses before we're reimbursed by the state of Pennsylvania. But I've been doing a lot of the talking. Let me open this back.
Yeah, this is Mike. I think it's a good policy to have, to create and to review as we go into the future. With the uncertainty of the pandemic, with the uncertainty of state funding, and also with some of our local property tax revenue, I think it should be flexible or provide us, not constrain us. But I do think it is good to have guardrails to be able to utilize the general fund as we see fit. But I do think it is good to document that, just so we're all aware of what that looks like, and how to proceed when certain things occur.
Thanks, Mike. And of course, credit to prior boards of commissioners, because there's a number of counties out there I'm aware of that, as of December 31st, have virtually no money in their unassigned fund balance, and they're taking out tax and revenue anticipation notes in early January to make payroll for the latter part of January. Steve, you've got quite a lot of background on the various boards. Do you have any perspectives?
Well, I think it's always been considered, 10, 15% of whatever number we pick. But I think if you've got that $7 million range covered, I think, come what may, that's a reasonable amount to keep in there. And sometimes it's going to float above that. Sometimes it might float temporarily behind it. To Mike's point earlier, I don't know what we've got coming next year, so we might be struggling to figure out, exactly, what we're all comfortable with before we have to take action and, on perhaps some sort of tax increase, sometime in the hopefully long distance future. But I think if we're mindful of the fact that we do need to keep, we work on a reimbursement basis, so we need to keep, a healthy balance available. So, and I think if we look at it that way, that's about the best you can do. We might find that we're cash rich at some point. Or, sometimes the reserve balance, it might be, might be a little stretched. So, we found that out whenever we had to adapt a few years ago when the state budget was tardy. So, we've got to look at all the opportunities we have to, keep the strength of county government there. So, if we do have an emergency or we do need cash in an immediate future, we have it. So that would be my thought. But I wouldn't stress too much over it right now. I think we're in pretty decent shape. So that's unless somebody wants to correct that. I feel good about where we are financially at this moment.
Thanks, Steve. And Steve brought up a point I was going to bring up a little later, which is great. Tom, as I remember, this literally happened as I took office, but I think our unassigned fund balance at the end of 2015 had been forecast to be something like 6 million and a lot of change. And that amount of money did allow Center County government to make it from the end of June until the first week of January before it literally ran out of cash. Because I think the second thing we did, my first day in office, was to take out a $10 million tax and revenue anticipation note so we could make sure we made payroll later in the month. Not a rush, Tom, but before our next meeting, which might not be for another month or two, if you could just pull up what the budget forecast for cash flow might have been in early 2015, where they said, oh yeah, but, we're expecting on December 31st, 2015, everything else being normal, to have a balance of $6.5 million. So it would just sort of be nice to know what the forecast had been at the time, because whatever that amount of money was, it did allow county government to go about 6 months before we ran out of cash.
Yeah, let's hope we don't see that type of event occur again real soon. But when there was the impasse, and we were, the other thing it saved us at that time was, they did the state did release a lot of our human service dollars, which probably carried us and covered us better than we would have been able to carry and cover ourselves, alone. So, we survived through the good grace of a lot of circumstance.
All right, so you're mentioning, Steve, that even our worst case scenario wasn't the absolute worst case scenario. We were receiving still some level of funding from the state, even if it was severely constrained.
Yeah, and I did look back real quick just to look and see, and the unassigned fund balance back at the end of 2014 was down to about 6.8 million, and then at the end of 2015 it went up to about 8.9 million, a little under 9. The last time that we had a tax increase, the unassigned general fund balance had gotten down to about $4.4 million, and the following year there was an increase in the tax millage rate to bring in more revenue. So I think in 2008 it was $5.9 million with the unassigned general fund balance. In 2009 it had gone down to about $4.4 million. And after that increase in 2010 it went back up to about 8.3.
Oh, that's very helpful, Tom. Thanks. Natalie, if you could put in a summary of what Tom just said about the 2008, 2009 timeframe, I think that would be very helpful to have in the minutes.
I do have one thought with this. No one's mentioned it yet. GFOA has come out with analytic-based techniques to help with the fund balance reserve and adjusting that for local conditions. They came out with an Excel file one, which of course they moved on their website and I can't find it at the moment, but I do have it saved somewhere. The other one they recommend is using a Monte Carlo simulation. And Monte Carlo simulations have been used for decades in the insurance industries and casinos. The advantage of the Monte Carlo simulation is it gives us the ability to say with confidence, 95% confidence, we can cover anything that happens emergency-wise with this fund balance. So it gives you a sliding scale where you can pick your confidence level as to where you want to be based upon prior history and inflation adjustments. Again, it's what the insurance industry uses all the time for car insurance, homeowners insurance. And they've put out a whole case study. They did that for Colorado Springs, where they have to worry about infrastructure. But it's the same concept. So I don't know if that's something anybody wants to look into or not, but I do have those documents saved somewhere because you have to move them on their website.
Yeah, I had the same issue, Travis. A lot of stuff being moved around recently. I think the first one sounds especially valuable. And then on the second one, again, everybody's pretty busy right now. So, as we have time, I'm familiar with the Monte Carlo simulations. and it might be helpful once we're a little further down this path to start changing a few variables and see what would happen in a close to worst case scenario. But I don't know about the rest of the elected officials on the call, but I don't necessarily want us to have a policy that uses the phrase Monte Carlo simulation in it.
It was a great Chevy vehicle.
There's no worry about that. No worries. Why that? Is it too ritzy? Is it too ritzy?
I think that's what we call it, the Monte Carlo resolution, right there.
Right. Yeah.
It was a classic car, but I'm thinking of it more from the gambling aspects.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Oh, we are getting a casino.
Mark, as a side note, I don't seem to have gotten the documents that you emailed out. So I don't know if I wasn't included on that or.
I was going to note the same thing.
Here, I'll send them out at the conclusion of the meeting to everybody.
Okay.
Just
Thank you.
So yeah, we can continue this discussion at our next meeting. I think it sort of loops into everybody's really busy right now. So maybe we end up nailing this down in late 2020 or early 2021. But it would be nice to just sort of set some guide rails and say, look, if we get below, say, a fund balance, unassigned fund balance below like a month or so's worth of county revenues, it might be time to do something drastic. Maybe we're comfortable at 2 or 3 months, but if it gets above, say, 3 months or 4 months, plus some other modifiers, maybe we might want to consider a rebate or reduction in property taxes. Just something, some well thought out guideline, just so that a future board doesn't just shoot from the hip on the topic. All right, anything else for the good of the order?
I don't think so.
No? All right, thanks everybody. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Do we have a second? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Yeah.
See you in a couple.